In a time that seems more individualistic than ever, where we've become more isolated as before because of social media, the internet, all things turning digital, that's when we need the discipline of action more than ever to be more just, social, and fair to each other.
The Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires.
Welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. My name is Benny, and I'm going to be your host for this episode. We're going to look at the discipline of action, the Stoic discipline of action, and why it matters today and why we really need it more than ever. We're going to go through some steps to see what it really means, what the Stoics viewed about it, and how we can practice it, and also why it is important in our lives. So let's dive right into it. So the Stoic discipline of action, horme, as we can look at it, is really all about the virtue of justice, about being fair, about being social, and how we interact with each other. That's so key in this discipline. We've had the discipline of desire before, where we were checking our wants and aversions. Then we had the discipline of assent, where we were looking at what is true or false and basing our judgments, our actions, our moral choice on those the facts of what's happening, on the truth. And now we're looking at the discipline of action. We went from a more individualistic place, right? Where we checked the things in ourselves, the desires and the action and the assent, the opinions that we have, our own actions. And now we're looking at how this fits in with the world around us. Because we have to remember, and this is a common misconception that people have about Stoicism, that Stoicism is this where we isolate ourselves, right? Where we just have to focus on ourselves. But the Stoics, they were very clear, unlike the Epicureans, for example. They said, no, we are pro-social animals. We have to connect. We have to make connections with the world around us, because that's just how we are. And we also have a duty to nature, to society, to make sure that we play our part, take up our responsibility and do our duties, because that's how we can all work and make a better society for each other, where we can help each other, where we can support each other. And in a world, I don't know if you look at the news, if you look at the social media channels where people are fighting, men against women, cultures against each other. In a world like this, we need this a little bit more. We need to understand that we are all cosmopolitans, as the Stoics see it. We are all part of this one world. We are in this globe floating around in space. And it was interesting. I was on a Spanish island just a few weeks before this episode, actually a week ago or so. And this island is just somewhere floating in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. You could see Atlantic. And as I was walking there, and I looked at Google Maps, right, to get this vision of where you are, this view from above, to see like, oh wow, look at where I am. And then I looked around and I saw the curvature of the earth, right, the horizon falling off, and I was like, wow, look at where we are. We're on this rock floating through space, and it's just us, with nature and the animals and everything. This is just us, and we have to make sure that we rely on each other and we can support each other. And that's something that we often tend to forget. We tend to look at our little circle and say, this is mine. These are my people. I need to defend them. I need to make sure that they're happy and good. Yes, of course, but not at the cost of everyone else. We have to make sure that we have a balanced life here. And that's where the Stoics really looked at, like, let's see what our duties are. And this can be construed in different ways. Obviously, we see Marcus Aurelius. He was fighting the Germanic tribes to save the Roman Empire, right? But maybe their impression of the barbaric tribes, the Germans, was wrong. Maybe by calling them barbaric, we already had a preconceived idea. Maybe if we would have spoken to them, if we would have shared the land, and if we would have exchanged information and knowledge, things would have been different. Because through my travels, and I was fortunate and privileged enough to travel a lot, I've seen that people want the same thing at the core. They want to have a peaceful, good life for themselves and for the people around them. And interesting enough, we are all people around us, right? We are all people. We're all involved in the same life. And one way or another, if I do something here, it will affect someone else. And I've seen the people who had the least amount of money or things, possessions, they were willing to share the most. While others, they were quite stingy with their things and their money. So that's something that we've got to keep in mind when we are interacting with people. What does it really mean to be social? What does it really mean to be part of humanity? And Marcus Aurelius, he reminds us to focus our action to humanity. We need to make that split, right? Where part of it says the Stoics, we need to accept fate. right? I want 5 to need to accept what's happening around us. But then when we look at action, when we need to make the moral choice, that's when we've got to look to the world around us, to nature. We've got to make sure that we are virtuous in all our actions, that we're using the knowledge of wisdom, of justice, of courage, and of temperance. And in this case, specifically of justice. What's fair to me? What's fair to the people around me? What is my duty in this? What is my responsibility? And as we can see, Marcus Aurelius, he was the emperor of the Roman Empire, and he had a lot of responsibilities. And one of them was to keep his empire safe. And one way to do that was to defend it, to go into, to protect your borders. And sometimes that's what we've got to do. We've got to protect those who can protect themselves. And sometimes we've got to find different ways to deal with obstacles, to deal with threats, if you will. And the Stoics always lean to the rational way of doing it. Many people say, if I can use anger in this case. If I'm just angry enough, I can fight anyone, right? But beware of the consequences. You might do things that you might regret yourself. You might turn into the people you're actually fighting against. So if we use rational mind, reason and logic, the wisdom, make sure that we are basing our actions upon the right impressions, then we can also make sure that they are the right actions to take, that are fair to us and that are fair to the people around us. Now, this doesn't mean that we should just be a puppet or a slave. No, we have our own agency. We have our own choices to make, but we've got to make them with different aspects in mind. One of those aspects is the role ethics. When we look at ethics, we have virtue ethics, being a good person and all, but in this case, we can apply role ethics to the situation. What does that mean? Role ethics can really help us divide what our duties and responsibilities might be. So when we look at a situation, maybe I'm, in this case, an employee, maybe a brother, maybe just someone walking on the street, maybe whatever kind of role that you have. From that picture, making it a little bit smaller, chunk size, you can ask yourself, what is my responsibility? What is my duty here? And what aren't my responsibilities or duties? Because sometimes we take on more than we should be doing. That might intrude with other people's roles and duties. But if we can stick to what we should be doing and perform that duty, perform those actions to the best of our capabilities, that's when we can make a real good contribution to society, to the world around us. So maybe you've had a situation where you were thinking like, what should I be doing? What is my role in this case? Well, dissect it. What is your role? What is the hat that you are wearing? Maybe you're wearing multiple hats. And you got to decide, hey, which one should I look for? Which one should I work towards? For example, you might be at work, right? But you also have a family at home. The boss asks you to work late, but your family needs your help with whatever, right? Maybe someone needs to be picked up, or maybe whatever is happening there. Now you've got a conflict. So you've got to make it a choice. Where is my responsibility required most? What is my best choice? And yes, sometimes it is difficult and sometimes we make a mistake. But we've got to make that decision there. And role ethics can really help us in making the best decision in those moments. Now the actions, again, we talk about these actions and sometimes we can make mistakes here and there. And the Stoics, they have this really high limit that they set. They talk about the sage, right? The perfect person. When it has pure reason and logic, and in every moment, this person, he or she, can make the best decision that is necessary. And that even a best decision might prove to not be a really good one based on the information that we might learn later. But in that moment, it is based on pure virtue, reason, and logic. So the sage will experience the eupatheia, the good emotions of joy, and based on that, they can build. Even if it was not the right decision with new information, but based on everything that we knew there, that was the perfect thing to do. And then here we come in, talking about my own example. I don't have a clue what's going on. I'm just trying. I'm just doing my best. And with the information that I have, just as the sage is looking for the information, with the information that I have, I try to make the best decision. I try to do what is most appropriate for the situation that I'm in. And yes, I might fail. I've failed many times. I've made many decisions that I look back as like, maybe that wasn't smart. Maybe that wasn't the best thing. I didn't have all the information. But it was the most appropriate for me to do at that moment. I did use my rational mind. I didn't let the irrational emotions, the pathe, right? The bad emotions, irrational emotions, I didn't let them guide me. I tried to apply my logic, try to apply my reason to make sure that I made the best decision. And from that, I can grow. I can learn. I don't have to beat myself up about it. I can apply some compassion. And that's really what it all matters, to try our best, to make sure that we make the appropriate actions in the moment that we need to act. Cicero says, to do the right action is good, but not doing the right, Not acting when you need to be acting is also is also a vice. Earlier we talked about the different disciplines, right? We had the discipline of action, the discipline of desire. Now we're looking at the discipline of action, which is more looking outward. But every person has this element of self-preservation, oikiosis, right? Appropriation to the self, making sure that we are doing well. And some people, they might find conflict in these two concepts, right? Where we have to look for ourselves and we have to look for the best for our community. But they do go hand in hand. Sometimes the best that is the most virtuous action might not be the best for us as a physical body or that aligns with our personal wants and desires, but it might be the best for the world around us or those around us. If, for example, a Stoic would gladly give up his life for another person. The sage, for example, let's talk about the sage, would gladly give up their lives for another sage if they knew that society would benefit more from them being alive than him or her. I'm not talking about here about self-sacrificing or all of these things, but we're looking at it in a smaller sense. But sometimes when we have a personal desire or a personal aversion, but we know that the virtuous thing to do is to make a different choice that goes against our personal wants or desires, but is better for the whole, then we should take care of that. Then we should take that action. And again, that is still self-preservation. Why? Because the Stoics, they talk about it in a very clear sense. They talk about what is it that we want to preserve? What is it that we want to guard? What is it that we want to keep safe? When we talk about that concept of eudaimonia, and the good spirit state, good character, that's what the Stoics talk about. So that's why virtue is the only good, as they say, is because by being virtuous, we are making sure that our soul, that our character, that our spirit is virtuous, is at peace. And even if we make a decision that goes against the desires that we have, but is good for nature, is good for the whole, we are still taking care of ourselves because we know that we've done the right thing. And we can still experience those good emotions of joy, although we have done something that might not go in flow with our personal goals and desires, but we still preserved ourselves because we preserved what the Stoics see is the most important part of what we have as a soul and a character. In the discipline of action, we talked a little bit about the moral choice, and this kind of builds up on what we're saying here. The proaeresis, making the right choice, needs the right information, needs the discipline of desire, because we cannot be guided by desires or aversions. We need to make sure that we give assent to the right impression, because we cannot be guided by wrong impressions, falsehoods, because all of that leads to us making a choice that is based on facts that are not correct or by being guided by desires or aversions that are leading us away from using our rational mind. And the moral choice is all compacted with virtue. So the moral choice really requires us to be calm, to use our rational minds, and to apply the virtues as a judge to see what the best action is. They cannot be guided by externals, right? If we want to be free, this is one of the key points in Stoic philosophy, to be free, to not be a slave of these things. If we want to be free, then we need to unshackle ourselves from those externals and make sure that we let ourselves be guided by our inner voice, that inner daemon that we have on our shoulders that says that, okay, we're doing the right thing here. That voice inside that tells you, like, okay, if I do this, then I'm going to be at peace. Let that be your compass to be at peace. And that's when we make the right choice, we will know that it's the right choice, because we will know that what we've been doing was good. And even the Stoics, they knew that it was difficult. They knew that even the sage, with the decision that they would make, there were things that wouldn't go along with their wants and desires. That's again where accepting of fate comes into mind. But they also gave us a reserve clause. Nowadays, if anyone if you know Arabic, then they talk about inshallah, God willing. But the Stoics said fate permitting. So that's kind of what they use. If they made plans, if they tried their best, if they had an action, if they said like, oh, we should be doing this, fate permitting. That's a reserve clause that we can use as well to help us alleviate a little bit of the pressure. Because, whatever action we take, we don't know the outcome. Fate might, fate does. The Stoics are deterministic. They believe that every cause has an effect, and it's one link chained to each other. But we don't know what's going to happen. So if we do make an action, if we do plan something, if we do want to go somewhere, we can say, fate permitting. Let's see if it actually happens. But we can still make that action based on our knowledge, based on what we know and where we want to go. Now, and as we wrap this up, we want to look at one important aspect as well. And we want to look at the circles of Hierocles, where we look at the connection of the things, the people, the world around us. We looked at the role ethics. We play different roles in different situations. But we also want to look at the world around us and see how we fit in and how connected we are to each other. Because this is key to the discipline of action, where we need to make the choices that are just for everybody as much as we can, fate permitting as well. So Heracles, he thought of these concentric circles. Where in the middle, we would be ourselves, right? Because that's how we view the world from our own mind. Again, that's the only thing that we can control, our opinions, our judgments, and our actions. And beyond that, we have spheres, right? We have the next sphere would be, for example, the close family or the close friends. We would work out towards acquaintances, people we know a little bit. Then we go to our community, society, country, the continent, the globe, the world, and at the end of the day, the logos that we are part of, the universal, the rational universe. And these circles, they all have a connection. We are all connected to each other. And let's say that the sage would be able to be friends with any other sage. They would be different. They would have, obviously different personalities, but they would recognize the sage by their actions, by the way they look at the world. And if we keep those circles in mind, and if we keep in mind how connected we are, how we're just 1 degree of separation away from each other, we're not that different. We're all human beings. We might have different traits, different way of doing things, but at the end of the day, at our core, we are the same. We are all human beings. And we have a duty and responsibility to each other, and not just to each other, to our nature as well, to the world around us. We can't just keep using all the resources because we feel like we have to. We want these things, and we want to more and more and more accumulate things that we don't really need. That's where we have temperance and moderation and justice. We have to make sure that we use these and make the right decisions as we go along. Again, that's why the discipline of action is key in this sense. That when we have an action, we shouldn't just let our wants and desires, guide us. So we looked at the discipline of desire, make sure that it's based on the facts. But the discipline of action really asks us to be just and fair, not just with ourselves, but with the world around us. And that's something that we can practice a little bit more. So maybe today you've taken an action and you've asked yourself, this was really good for me. This was great. Advanced my career, advanced this and that. But what impact did it have on the people around you? Maybe if you had this promotion, now you have to work more and more and more, and your family can't see you as much. Maybe if you made more money, the family will now treat you differently in a way that you wouldn't want. So we have to keep in mind that our actions do influence and do have a reaction to the world around us. And maybe that's not what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. Maybe our skills and our qualities can be put to use in a better way for society. And that's also part of our duty. Sometimes it might be something that we don't really want to be doing. Look at Marcus Aurelius. My instinct tells me that if you would have asked him, it was like, hey, what would you love to be doing? Would you love to be emperor of the Roman Empire? I'm sure that he wouldn't agree on that. I think he probably would have maybe been a philosopher or writer or whatever. But this was his role in life. This was something that he was supposed to take on. Why? Because he was the best person to fulfill that role with the society and the common good in mind. And he took that role upon himself in the best case he could. And read the Meditations. He was struggling. This wasn't an easy gig for him. He was struggling with all of these things. But yet he took it on because he knew that this was his place. This was his way in life to do his duty, to make sure that he fulfilled his responsibility. And that's something that we should be doing as well. Look at the role that you're playing and then make sure that you do it the best way that you can. Because the people around you and yourself deserve it. So again, thank you for joining us here on this episode of the Via Stoica Podcast. If you like these episodes and if you like these conversations, please send us a thumbs up, give us a comment, subscribe to the podcast. All of this really helps us reach a bigger audience. If you want to get some more content, you can go to viastoica.com. You can also sign up for the newsletter, The Pause, to have a little bit of tranquility into your inbox every month. And you can also subscribe or schedule a free consultation with us and with one of our coaches on the website. You can just go there, book a consultation, and we can talk about this. If you're struggling with how to act with justice and with fairness and how to really tie these 3 disciplines that we talked about, discipline of desire, assent, and action together, make sure that you live in a proper way, reach out, get in touch, book a free consultation, and we'll talk. We'll see how we can help from there. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and hope to see you in the next one.
Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.